What's up, everyone? This is Jack from the Cardboard Herald, and before we dive into this episode, I just wanted to let you know that this is a guest-hosted episode where Andrew Birkett of Atheris Games comes in and does an interview with Joe and Jason of Or the Mining Game, which is a really cool game that's on Kickstarter right now if you're listening to this as it goes live. In fact, last time I checked, it was around 75% on the first day. How cool is that? But I need to give you a disclaimer. Even though Andrew addresses this as part of the interview itself, he is part of the Kickstarter campaign. Atheris Games is assisting with the kickstarting, even though they're not publishing it. Andrew makes this very clear in the interview, and he made it very clear with me going into it, but I realized that this is a good way of giving a unique perspective that I don't normally have. So I said, you know what? Sure, that sounds great as long as we're all above board and making sure everyone in the audience knows that going in. So there is the disclaimer. Second little bit of housekeeping that I wanted to do is to let you know that I am going to be on the interview podcast much more often. I know we've had a lot of guest hosts recently. We've had a ton of projects going on in the Cardboard Herald in general, and I've needed a little bit of a reprieve in some ways, but I'm reconsolidating things. I'm looking at what are the best ways of moving forward, what is working with the Cardboard Herald, what hasn't worked as far as little offshoot projects. I think that we still may have some guest hosting in the future, and I really, really appreciate and look forward to that. It gives a diversity to our content, but I have already done a ton of interviews that are lined up, that are ready to go for you, so expect to hear a lot of my voice in the coming weeks, including in next week and the following week's episodes with Christophe Boulanger, the designer of Archipelago. Are you kidding me? One of my favorite games of all time. And that interview got a little off the rails and bananas in the best sorts of ways, which is why I had to split it into two separate episodes. So look forward to that. Also, last thing I wanted to mention as the third bit of housekeeping is we have a really exciting new show on the video channel that I am so excited about called Off the Table. It is a tabletop gaming news, community, and questions video that's a really short 10 minutes or less video series regularly put out. So far we only have two. It might be bi-weekly in the future, but I'm going to try to keep it to weekly at the moment while I kind of get a groove onto what that is. But it's a way of consolidating the last week's worth of tabletop gaming news with a slight bit of commentary delivered in a tight, clean package with lots of images and links and information. You can find it on our Twitter pinned to our account at Cardboard Herald, as well as on our youtube.com/The Cardboard Herald. If you are going to do anything to support us, then please, 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 please check out this show, check out the format, give some feedback in the comments, give some questions for us to answer in future episodes, and share it with other people. I've heard time and time again in the tabletop community that there aren't enough good ways to have a quick representation of news, things that are happening. And I want this to be a way that someone can listen on a weekly basis, just pop it up into a window and just have it going in the background, or preferably watch it, and they can get kind of a wrap up of the things going on in the community, some spotlights, some noteworthy items in the news, and also get some questions answered. So that's it. I really appreciate you checking that out, and I really appreciate you, as always, listening to this episode. So let's get to it. Without further ado, here is Andrew Birkett of Atheris Entertainment interviewing the creators of Or the Mining Game.
Hello everyone, this is Andrew. I'm guest hosting for the Cardboard Herald. Thank Jack for letting me guest host. I'm here with the designers of Or the Mining Game. So we are with Jason and Joe. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing alright. I'm excited to talk to you guys about the game. I do have a short disclaimer that I am working with Quick Simple Fun on the project, and we spoke with Jack, and Jack and I both agreed that I think Joe and Jason have some really cool things to talk about for the podcast, and so even though I'm working with them, we just wanted to add that little disclaimer in there. Alright, so guys, when did you design Or the Mining Game?
So Or has been going for a while. I think it was around 2012 that we started working on it. I mean, it started with a pretty basic idea, just the worker placement that moves down in a mine. And I came up with that idea, and then Jason joined me pretty shortly afterwards, and we kind of just fleshed out the idea from there. But yeah, it's been a work in progress for almost 7 years now at this point.
It is an OG.
Yeah, I think that's longer than any of my game designs, so that's pretty awesome. So what led you guys to meet each other? Had you designed games together before, or was this the first game you worked on together?
Oh, man, funny story. Yeah, no, this is definitely first game. We were both, I guess I met Joe in 2012. We were at a... Geez, Joe, I don't know if you remember the name of the meetup group. It was a host.
Boston Social and Silly Gaming meetup in Boston.
Shout out to them.
Wow.
I think Brian, was he the dude that organized that?
Brian Bagstone, yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was kind of funny because I played games all my life, but there was a dry period for a long time, and then I suddenly rediscovered like what tabletop was that year, and so I was looking around for meetup groups, and I found that one. And so I don't know if it was the first one, Joe, that I went to. It was very fortuitous. So
I mean, I moved to Boston in 2012 and just was looking for both board game meetups and then also game design meetups. And so I met Jason at that meetup, and then I got Jason to go to the Game Makers Guild in Boston, which is a great group of people for game design. And so we both were independently kind of working on our own games just for fun. But then, we both just really liked the idea and decided to actually work on it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. When you started designing the game, I know you said that mechanism, which is honestly one of the things I enjoy most about the game, where a worker stays within the mine and delves deeper and can get better rewards, was the central focus. But was it always a mining game, or did you have any other ideas for it at the beginning?
I think I had the idea for the mechanism, and it just fit with mining so well that I just never looked back and really considered anything else. I think people tried to talk to me about, you should make it about mining in space or whatever. But honestly, I like the old school Euro games with very kind of dry and quotation mark themes, but just with good mechanics and are engaging and fun just from the mechanics alone. So I really just took that mechanic, figured it worked well with mining, and never looked back.
It definitely makes sense. It doesn't feel like, why is my dude going further down in the mine? It's like, okay, that makes sense. I'm getting more resources. When you first started designing the game, how long do you think it was before you went from, all right, so this is an idea, to actually having a prototype and playing it in that game design guild?
It was like the first time Joe brought it to me, I was like, this is good. But I knew from there that, wanted to work on it and kind of develop it further. But its first iteration was it was gold, I felt like.
I mean, it's definitely
no pun. I don't do puns, but yeah, sorry. Not that was totally intentional. Yeah.
I think for the first few months, it was definitely one of those that I would stay up until 2 a.m. writing things on index cards and putting it together. So, the first iterations were definitely pretty rough, but the core mechanics were solid enough that we kind of went, pretty steadily with it in terms of coming up with new iterations and fixing all the issues and getting to the point that we had a playable enough prototype to actually bring and show to people.
It's always interesting. I do game design myself, and I'll go to some of the playtest events. Most of the games are a lot further developed, and a lot of the local designers are significantly better designers than I am. But I do have those games where I have some mechanism, and even if the first prototypes, aren't completely right, I'm like, this sort of works, and I know it works, and it's just, refining everything to get it to actually be fun. How big is the game design group that you guys were a part of at that time?
I started going, I think, pretty early in the iteration. It's interesting. I've definitely been a part of that group since very early in its inception, and it kind of changed names and changed leadership and changed who was organizing it. But it's gone from a group that was, maybe like 10 or 15 people and, not everyone could play their game, to a really, now these days, it's a very well organized group that usually has 20, 30, 40, 50 people show up, and they're organized enough that everyone actually gets to have their game tested, which is a great resource for designers, since that's not always something that really happens.
Yeah,
they have a few chapters now, right? I mean, they got, was it the Philadelphia chapter, Joe? Is that what I saw?
Oh, yeah, there's one in Philly. I think there's supposedly one in Idaho.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They've grown a lot.
It's all just people who were in Boston or met people from our Boston, and we're just like, this is awesome. I want to do this as well. So
Orlando has a burgeoning game design scene, and so I lived in Gainesville, Florida, because I went to the University of Florida, and so I went from like a 3 maybe person group, because people would get busy, and a lot of the people in Gainesville are like professors and stuff, so we had a few like regular game designers, but they couldn't attend regular meetings, so yeah, on a normal basis we had like maybe 3 to 5 people. And then I came to Orlando, and like the first meeting I went to, there was like 30 people, and I was like, whoa, okay. This is different.
Yeah. I think Boston definitely has that too, where we benefit during the school year of just college kids who want to show up and play people's games and try out stuff, which is definitely a useful resource of having people willing to sit down and just play a kind of mediocre game in progress.
Yeah, this isn't the greatest. My prototypes too are like, I normally will get index cards, and then I put sticky notes on them and put them in card sleeves. So mine are like the ugliest prototypes you could ever possibly imagine. It's kind of like a running joke around Orlando. If anyone sees my game, they're like, oh yeah, that's Andrew's game. And it's so obvious. And so, yeah, it's a little difficult sometimes to encourage people that don't play a lot of games, or maybe play normally published games, to be like, yeah, you want to play this game on sticky notes. This is going to be fun. Where in the process did you guys start looking for a publisher? After you came up with this idea and started playtesting it at your local meetups, when did you say, all right, so we need to actually make this thing?
The sort of initiating moment when we realized that we had to actually get this game published was when we were at the Boston Festival of Indie Games, and we won Audience Choice. And it was at that moment when all of a sudden people are like, okay, so when is this game going to be published? When can I own a copy? So we initially thought about sort of self-publishing and doing it ourselves, but that's definitely something that two sort of fresh-faced designers, it was a bit more than we wanted to. And so from there, we started thinking about looking for designers, but it's also one that I didn't want to bring it to a designer until I really felt like it was well-designed, really had all of its ducks in a row, and didn't have major design issues. So we definitely worked on it for another 3 or 4 years after that to really get it polished, and to the point that we wanted to get it in front of publishers and see if they wanted to bring it to the masses.
When you were thinking about self-publishing it, did you try and actually like make any copies, or?
Yeah, we had several iterations. Did make a few copies. We had that party at your house, do you remember, where we like assembled all the different components?
Yeah, we've went through a lot of iterations of making our own sort of homemade copies. We had some great initial artwork done by Stephen Davies that we
used,
and a lot
big
of
shout out. Big shout out. Very talented dude.
So once Ore is published officially under Quick Simple Fun Games, then there's going to be the rare B-side versions from 3 Kickstarter. Not really, but yeah, we definitely have made some interesting home brewed versions of the games to give out to friends and to try to send to publishers and send to reviewers. And those are hopefully still kicking around out there somewhere.
That's cool. Somewhere out there, someone's playing the game with different artwork than what I'm playing with, so that's cool. When you got that artwork, did you sell any of those copies, or were you just giving those to friends and family?
We sold them to some people, though it mostly was just our very low-res version of a crowdfunding, where we just kind of asked people to give us some money so that we could afford to print out a bunch of copies of cards and buy materials to make little tokens and chits and everything.
I'm just curious because I obviously decided to self-publish my first game and then started my gaming company from there, and realized, wow, okay, so I've always been entrepreneurial, and I realized that I actually kind of like that process almost as much as I like design, and so even when it's not my own design, I still feel a part of the game and want to make cool games and release them into the world. And it's interesting though, seeing like kind of the different mindsets, and obviously entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and starting a publishing company is a ton of work.
It's one, life gets in the way, which Jason can probably speak to that a bit more as a
oh my God,
father of a young child.
yes. Well, I guess, yeah, got engaged, got married, and had a child, and another one on the way in the time that we've had this game in development.
Well, congratulations. That's great.
Yeah.
When did QSF finally end up signing the game, and were they kind of the first publisher you approached with this, or did you meet a bunch of publishers at conventions, or?
Yeah, so I went to the participated in the publisher speed dating at Gen Con that James Matthew organized. And so I met a bunch of different publishers. There were a few that seemed interested in it at that time, but QSF was definitely a bit more interested. We sat down and played the game at Gen Con. Patrick definitely liked the look of the game, clearly had some good ideas for it, and so we ended up signing with them just because we were excited to have someone else who is as excited about our game as we are.
Yeah, that's definitely very important. The publisher believes and loves the product as much as you are. Obviously, they're gonna promote it better and sell more copies than if they were just like, oh, okay, this is something to fill the portfolio a little bit. When you met with Patrick at Gen Con, you played the game with him several times, and then how long did it take to kind of get a contract together?
It moved pretty quickly, I think. I mean, we played, I think a couple of times at Gen Con, and then I think I left a copy of our game with him after Gen Con, and he went home, played it with some of the other people from QSF, and I don't know, I think it was maybe a month or two after that he was ready to sign a contract and get us into the QSF family.
Once you had the signed game, is there any part of the process that you didn't expect or realize going into it that you kind of learned along the way that is interesting that other designers might be kind of excited to hear about?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely an interesting process. I think it always is interesting when you do sign on with a publisher and get someone else looking kind of under the hood of your game. I think it's especially hard or novel when you've been working on a game for 5 or 6 years, and then suddenly you bring someone else in and they're coming at it with a fresh set of ideas. And it was really great because I think to a certain extent we were a bit kind of had our idea of what the game was, how it was going to play, how things should be set up. And Patrick and Mike Michielsick, who was the project manager who helped with kind of doing some of the redesign work on Or once it got signed with QSF, they had a lot of great ideas, both about what things could be polished with the game and then what could be added to make it even better. And so they added a board to the game, which is something that we had never had before. They kind of tightened up the turn, so the turn order and what players were doing. And I think, looking at the new version and the game board, it looks great. It looks so much better than we ever had it at. And it's great because I think they did do a really good job of kind of keeping the core mechanics that do make Or great, but then help kind of add in and take away add in stuff that was valuable and take away stuff that really wasn't adding stuff to the game. And I think that is the great thing about working with a publisher is just getting that fresh set of eyes and having people able to just say, this is what works. Here's what doesn't work. Let's work together and find a way to, fix that.
Yeah, I think that's actually something that's very important that a lot of people don't realize is when I did my first game, I didn't really, I think, realize the development and that kind of process. And so now when I have games that Atheris publishes that are my own game designs, I hire outside developers to get that other set of eyes because I think, like you mentioned, it is really important. When I go into someone else's game, I can see quickly and see like what's wrong with it, but with my own game, I've been playing it for so long, I have some blinder on that doesn't allow me to do that. So other set of eyes will allow me to kind of notice things that I wasn't paying attention to. I didn't realize, okay, this wasn't actually making the game more fun, or this is slowing it down, and all that kind of stuff.
And I think it's even, I think some of the things that they brought up were things that we had knew were issues with the game, and just, after 5 years, we're kind of like, I don't think you can make that better. I don't think there's any way you can take that, negative part out of the game. And then, in 2 months, they figured out a way to take it out of the game. So that's why it's good to have, someone with a fresh set of eyes and years of experience kind of come in and help.
With design, there are a lot of those points where you're like, well, maybe this kind of issue is just part of the game, and that, that's how the game's always going to be, and that's it. There's a few games that we signed for Atheris that were sort of like that, where I was like, maybe this is just how it's going to be, and then we had other people play test it, and people kept bringing up the problem, and they're like, okay, well, maybe this isn't how the game's supposed to be. Maybe we actually do have to fix this. It's interesting. And Mike's an awesome developer. I actually signed one of his games recently. He's local to me, and so that's part of why I ended up working on Or. Patrick and QSF are located out of Tampa, and I'm in Orlando, Florida. So he comes down to Orlando fairly often, especially when Mike was their project manager. Mike's in Orlando, so Patrick would come to meet him, and so we ended up doing a lot of playtesting. So I played various iterations of Or and liked it enough that I wanted to be a part of the project. So after Or was signed, did you guys start working on any other games, or do you guys still go to the local meetups? Or
I've been a bit lazy. I know. Jason has been a bit lazy.
Probably not lazier than me. It's like a sad story. I was living in Boston when Joe and I met and we developed Or, but I did kind of follow my wife to Rhode Island, so I've been here for a little while, and I guess you could say it's close, but it's still hour and a half away. So
yeah.
So I guess we kept the relationship going, Joe and I, but it's tough. And I haven't been involved in the scene down here. There's so many great resources down here to take advantage of. There's a great game shop, like literally a mile and a half down the road from me, but just haven't been able to take advantage of it. So don't end up like me. That's my advice to everyone.
Yeah,
well, you just have to wait until Ronan is old enough to go to the game shop with you, and then you've got all the excuse in the world.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what kids are for, right? So we're going to Kickstarter January 22nd with the game, and now that the date is kind of approaching, and we're kind of only a few months away until the Kickstarter, are you guys getting excited and want to design more games?
I got some things bouncing around my head.
Yeah, I think that's the game designer mantra, is that you've always got stuff kicking around your head.
That's true. I make quirky games. That's kind of my go-to. If the theme is weird enough, I'll make the game. So like my last game is a game about lost socks. So your goal is to do your laundry, and ghosts are stealing everyone's socks. So, I'm trying to solve all these major issues with society, like where do our socks go? I figured that out. It's ghosts.
See, that sounds like a few of the designers I know who, it seems like their entire design process is to come up with a silly pun and then just make a game about it. Like that's their only design process. Just come up with the dumbest pun you can think of, and then just make a game about it.
well, yeah. I think of weird themes, and then I'm a writer, so I'm naturally weird as hell. And so I'll think of alliterations, and I'll be like, all right, I'm going to make a game for every letter of the alphabet. So I'm just going to go through all the alliterations. So all my game names are alliterations, and I'm going to make 26 games eventually. I don't know when that will be, but eventually I will have all 26 letters.
Yeah, so how far in the alphabet have you got so far?
Well, I kind of go all over the place. So I have C, S, and then I'm working on a game with H. I'm going to go all over the place. I make note. Once I do a letter, I'm not going back. So I'm like trying to do a circus-themed game right now, and I'm like, shit, I can't use the word circus. So that does lead me to another question I have for you guys. When you originally signed the game, do you know if QSF was always planning on kickstarting it, or is that kind of a newer development?
I guess I always had it in the back of my head. I mean, I don't know, Joe.
I think Patrick had talked about, just doing a direct publishing of it. But I think it's also, I think the interesting thing is I think Ore was a bit bigger of a game than Patrick has worked on in the past, or I think he sort of said that it was a bit more of a sort of heavier Euro game than some of the stuff that he's previously done. And I think he's sort of, because of that, he was thinking that it might be better to go to Kickstarter and try to get some crowdfunding to help do the initial printing and also just, get some extra attention on it through Kickstarter and through crowdfunding. But yeah, we discussed a few different options with him because I know QSF is typically just sort of publish things directly without crowdfunding, but I think they decided to give it a try for Ore since it does make sense for our game.
Yeah, I definitely think, obviously, the manufacturing cost of a larger game is significantly higher, and a lot of their games are smaller, less component intensive, and, shorter gameplay. So I think it is sort of a little bit outside of their realm of normal games. I think the other bigger-ish game that they have is Burano, but I don't know that they have any other ones that kind of fit into that box size and component complexity.
And I mean, I think we're hoping the fact that, we've been working on it for 6 years and have been bringing it to conventions hopefully means that we've built up enough of a following that a Kickstarter shouldn't be too difficult to get off the ground.
Yeah, I think the Kickstarter is going to do really well. I think people are going to be enticed with the worker placement element for the mines. I think something that really makes the game unique is that element of where you kind of want to pull your worker back. You're like, I don't want him to just sit there in the mines and just get me stuff. But you need this to complete this contract, and in order to complete it, you need that resource. And so you have to leave him sitting there, and then the next round, you're not going to have that worker. So you have a little bit less you can do. But obviously, you need those resources, or you lose the contract. So I think there's a lot of cool, interesting decisions because of that mechanism, and they're really accentuated in the current iteration of the game. I didn't play all the former versions, but I know that decision is difficult. It's like, oh, do I want to stay in the mine for 5 rounds to get all this resource because my contract needs it?
The interesting part of the game is really kind of understanding the rules and understanding the strategy and trying to make good decisions about what to do. And that's why I think Ore is a pretty good game, because there's a lot of different things you can do, and it's really impossible. Even after 7 years of playing the game myself, I'm still not always sure what the best direction to go and what the best thing to do is on each turn, because it does give you a lot of interesting decisions to make.
There's a lot of replayability and different aspects that certain other players' decisions can factor in a lot of what you end up doing, and what's kind of the optimal strategy for a particular game depends on what other players are doing. I know that when we played with Just Got Played, everyone's strategy was completely different. We all did, obviously you have to get some contracts and in order to win the game, and you have to build some buildings, but one player had built like 1,000,001 buildings. Each of their contracts allowed them to build like 3 or 4, and he just like kept stacking on buildings. And then another player kept using private mines whenever he needed those resources. And then I just completed as many contracts as humanly possible. So I had a bunch of different ones, and we all came in within 1 point of each other. I had 28 points, another player had 28, and then the third player, Lloyd, had 29. So he beat us by 1 point. Yeah, and it just feels like, if I had one more turn, I could have beat him. That's I think the makings of a good game is being like, I was one turn away of doing what I wanted to do. I didn't map this out perfectly.
Another thing I like about Ore is that I feel like it's not very linear in how you win the game. I think I've definitely played a lot of worker placement games where it's just whoever can get the biggest pile of stuff wins. And I think Ore has just never been like that, because it's not just about getting a bunch of resources. It's figuring out useful ways to use them, whether it's by, selling on contracts or building buildings. And I don't know, I think that's one of the things I've always liked about the game is it ties back into that whole, meaningful decisions. It's not just how do I get a big pile of stuff. It's what do I do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the resources don't matter unless you use it for something. So it's not like at the end of the game you're like, awesome, I have a bunch of gold and I'm going to win the game because of that. I very much appreciate talking to you guys, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me today.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, so great to talk with you.
As always, the Cardboard Herald is a completely free service focused on spotlighting games, gamers, and game creators. You can find all of our podcasts, including the Cardboard Herald and TCbH reviews, on iTunes, Stitcher, and our website. For more recommendations and reviews, you can also head over to our YouTube channel. We do not pay to advertise the show, so please continue spreading the word, following, liking, rating, and doing all the social media things. It truly does help us out a ton. If you'd like to drop us a line and maybe have your listener mail read on air, find us on Twitter at Cardboard Herald, or send us an email to cardboardherald@gmail.com, or click the contact link on our page. Once again, thank you for listening. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald, and you keep on gaming.